So there's talks right now that Shenmue 3, which it's been rumored for a while that it's supposed to be in production, might actually be going the route of Kickstarter. Now, this could come under a bunch of scrutiny, and it could also come under a whole bunch of people who are just absolutely ecstatic at the idea that there could in fact be a third Shenmue game to finally finish off the series. Now, the main reason why there's going to be scrutiny behind it is because, obviously, of Kickstarter. See, a lot of people have, over the course of time, since Kickstarter kind of came to fruition and came into being, a lot of people have had a lot of disgust with Kickstarter, because for the most part, there's a lot of people out there that go out of their way to use and abuse it, beyond understanding. So, naturally, it's left a bad taste on a lot of people's mouths, and they don't really like it for that main reason. So that's something that just kind of is sitting out there, and, you know, it's going to make things look bad. So when you couple it with something that a lot of people are excited about, you're going to get a lot of uneven opinions about it. So I decided to kind of look at this, like step back and look at this from a certain standpoint. The Shenmue games are something that has a very loyal and very die-hard fan base. I mean, I liked them ever since our incarnation of the Dreamcast in the very first Shenmue game. I became an instant fan. I never imported Shenmue 2, but I did eventually get to play it on a buddy's regular Xbox. I didn't own an Xbox for a really long time until well after the system was like damn near dead. Like the last year into its life cycle, that's when I finally I picked up one. But I enjoyed the living hell out of it, just as much as I did the first game. It was just, it's still a refreshing game. I mean, now we've had games like Sleeping Dogs, which are kind of similar, and we've had games like the Yakuza games, which again are pretty similar. And, you know, I like that kind of style of game. To me, it's just really fun. I like games that have a big-time story to tell, but, you know, are also like, it's like a big world. You can just wander around and there's shit going on and stuff. Everybody likes open worlds where there's like all this intricate shit that you can go and see and all these characters you can interact with, and basically a lot of little mini adventures you can go on outside of the main adventure. Well, that's one of the very, very, very bad voice acting. It's so bad it becomes good, and I like that. I can't help it. I've liked cheesy horror movies since I was younger, and then go on into today, and it's pretty much transitioned into video games too. Oh, the 90s and all the voice acting then. There was so much bad voice acting. But back on point, whenever I think about, you know, could Kickstarter be a good idea for something like this? In a lot of ways, yeah. I say this based off of one fact. Shenmue was an extremely expensive game for them to make at the time. Nowadays, it probably won't be nearly as expensive, but to just think about, you know, what the expense cost is for a lot of games. Like, a lot of development studios have been going and throwing out their projected cost just for making things lately, and it's giving a lot of consumers and a lot of fans an inside look as to what the cost is, what the time it takes, and, you know, and basically what resources are needed to get the end result that we're all trying to enjoy. And with something like Shenmue, it could cost them a whole bunch of money, and Sega has gone on record, and they've said, you know, even Yu Suzuki himself has gone on to say it cost a lot of money, and they weren't really making that money back. So it would be at a loss to make fans happy, and a business can't stay afloat by doing that. That's just a sad fact of it. So would Kickstarter be a viable option for it? Most definitely. But I'd want them to go about it the right way. You see, a little while ago I was talking about Pure Solar. And the game, absolutely amazing. You know, the folks at Watermelon who developed it and stuff, just absolutely bang-up job on it. They were doing the HD version. That's pretty much what I was going and gushing over. Well, I like the fact that they went about the Kickstarter that, you know, donate this much money. That's, you bought the game, basically. So you put your down payment on it and you reserved your copy by doing that. So if they meet X amount of copies, awesome. But then they kept going with it. But like, okay, well, if we reach this goal, we'll just keep going and adding additional stuff, making all the copies better, like all of them, no matter which one that you decide to go and get, and there's going to be additional things added into the packages and stuff like that. If Sega played it smart, they'd be able to do something like this. I mean, to me, I would love to no end to hear that they're making, you know, one for Wii U, one for PS3, one for Xbox 360, one for PC. So we'll say that those will be the 4, main focused ones. Potentially, even try to make it for PS4 and next Xbox, assuming that, they're out at the time whenever they go about doing something like this. But if they went about doing that and they said, okay, well, you go and you plunk down $60, you now have the game. And if they reached a certain goal, they could then make digital copies, and it's like, half the cost, $30. You now have the game in digital form, whether it was on Steam, whether it was on Xbox, Live, whether it was on PSN, on the Wii U shop, and things like that. That, again, would garner a bunch of attention. A lot of people would be okay with that. If you make collector's editions, which, collectors and non-collectors alike can get into the idea of getting some extras with something, assuming they really, really like the game itself, and the extras themselves are noteworthy enough to go and plunk down the extra cash because it's something that you're into. I would like to see like little digitized copies of Shenmue 1 and 2, or even physical copies if they could include them. That would be fantastic. Seeing like Shenmue 1, Shenmue 2 in HD on like the PS3, Xbox 360, and Wii U would be absolutely fantastic. They could do that cross-platform thing for PlayStation, where you could have like a little copy that'll play on your Vita. Again, that'd be very cool. If they did something similar with the 3DS, so the Wii U and the 3DS would both have their version. There's a lot of ideas that I can imagine. These are just like random examples of things that they could go about, like, all right, we're going to go and include those. They could have the art book. They could have, the entire story of Shenmue just in like one big ass glossy book. They could have figures, which would be really cool. I'm a big fan of getting like figures and statues and stuff like that, just because I think that shit's kind of cool. There's a bevy of extras that they could go about to go in sweeten the pot to make it so that if somebody is like, I don't know about Kickstarter, and then they see that, I know a lot of people don't like the idea of things like e-begging and things like that, but for something like this, at the very least, you can see where your money is going to go to. I think it's silly whenever they have something like, all right, well, for $1, we'll just put your name on the website as a thank you. Something like that's kind of silly and pointless. But if they said something like this, all right, if you go and you plunk that, like, make $30 like the minimum, and that'll go and get you a digitized copy. That'd be fantastic. I don't think that they should even bother with anything lower than that, because obviously you can't really get a whole hell of a lot. Other than it's just like, here, this is just a random donation. Can everybody afford $30? No, but this would afford them, the effort to go forth and try to do this, because they can see, all right, that person actually really wanted a copy to play. That's really cool. And even if somebody wants to go on there, just give give like an extra $30 and then go and give the copy away to somebody. People that run like YouTube channels or gaming sites or gaming forums or even like gaming stores. I'm having a raffle at my game store and I'm going to go give away like X amount of copies of the Shenmue 3 that's going to be coming out at this date. That'd be cool. And then, again, we would actually have closure on the series. A lot of people have been wanting to see what's going to happen next, and nobody knows. And, Yu Suzuki has expressed interest time and again in seeing something like this. The downside is a lot of people just getting over the hurdle of the bad taste left in their mouth of all the people who've pretty much abused the living shit out of Kickstarter for all the wrong reasons. With something like this, it doesn't actually have to be that way. I understand fully why they're going about this, which is what I explained before. So something like this isn't all that bad to me. I understand when a studio is like, we want to make the game, we didn't make enough to warrant making another game, and things cost even more nowadays. That's what sucks. Us as fans, we usually don't give a shit about, like, how much time you're putting in, how much money it's costing you. We don't give a shit about the resources that you need. But ultimately, you kind of have to take a step back, and you have to give a shit to a certain extent if it's something that you keep on saying that you want. So to have, a basic understanding of everything does really help in a case like this. And that's basically what I've been trying to understand and just read up and basically like just absorb all the knowledge that I can, so, you know, I can go and express that in a video like I am right now to everybody. And there's a lot of other variables that I could go and take into account and go and express, but I mean, for the most part, I'm just trying to stick to all the key points so that everybody has an understanding, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that totally makes sense. But again, it does call into question, could you actually be okay with funding the game if your money went towards getting yourself a copy of the game, and it was guaranteed on this date when the game comes out, and that money that you put towards the Kickstarter and it met its goal, would you be okay with doing that, and they basically reserve your copy and send it out to you? You know, and if it did make, you know, X amount of dollars, it could get like a full retail release into stores, which would be really nice just to see it like out on store shelves. Sure, it might be a limited release, and many of us would already be fine with something like that, but at the very least, it would get out into store shelves for people who weren't aware the entire time that it was actually going on. They're like, fuck, I wish I would have been able to reserve that. But luckily, you know, that would go and give them an option of having a physical copy, but then you have all the digital copies so that it can still get around. Even if you don't have the physical version, at least you're getting to play the game, and that's all that really counts at the end of the day, is the experience and you enjoying it. You know, it's kind of a rough thing to go about, and it's kind of strange, you know, when you think of a company as big as Sega wanting to make a game that is as well known as Shenmue and not being able to do it to a certain extent because it just didn't sell well. It's kind of strange. It really is. I mean, just thinking about it, it's like, wow, that's like, you know, Nintendo saying we can't get the money together to go make Legend of Zelda, which would be absolutely silly because Nintendo has billions of dollars. But regardless, something like that would just be unimaginable. You know, and I think about this, and it made me think about if Kickstarter was applied to a lot of other game franchises and game series and just individual titles that never saw a sequel, if they would apply this exact kind of business model to that would be awesome. You know, I've wanted to see Brutal Legend 2. Just as an example, I've wanted to see it so much, but I know that the game was extremely expensive for Double Fine, the studio that made it. It's extremely expensive for them to make, and it didn't make like a gajillion dollars, which sucked because it was a fantastic game. You know, I always wondered, what if they went about the Kickstarter route? You know, again, you're going to have a lot of naysayers who are just like, fuck this, I don't want to see something like that. But if they're going about it right, is it okay then? You know, Kickstarter is actually like a really good thing, as long as it's not abused to no fucking end. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who are absolutely diehard, you know, about something that they love, about something that they have interest in, you know, something that's just, it means the world to them. So they'd be willing to go and throw away money at whatever it is, with no return at all, just because they gave a shit and because they had money in their pocket. There's people that would save up just to do it because they give a shit about something. You know, and that can be any number of things. But if it's done right, I think that it's okay, but it begs the question, is it okay to all of you? That's truthfully what matters, is the mass populace. And I mean, this question mostly is going to be for fans of Shenmue, but other people, you know, if you've ever even had an interest in Shenmue, or if, I mean, maybe you just want to talk about it in general, you know, outside of Shenmue, maybe other series. I mean, there's other games that we've all wanted to see get translated and brought over. We've wanted to see game sequels. We've wanted to see franchises brought into HD and be remade from the ground up and stuff like that. You know, I mean, I can think of things for, like, the absolute end of time. You know, I want a Streets of Rage 4, another big Sega title. It's like, I would love something like that. It would make me really happy. You know, I would love to see Legend of Dragoon 2, which Sony was in development of it, and then canned it. I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me, really? Fuck. You know, just something like that bums me out to no end. But again, I would only want them to go about it if they're gonna do it right. I want to pay this amount, and I paid for my copy. There we go. I want there to be digital copies. I want there to be physical copies. If they can do collector's editions, that would be fantastic. I want them to go multi-platform. I want it to be on PC. I want it to be on console. I want it to be on handheld. You know, I want them to go the whole 9 yards so that everybody and anybody is going to be appeased and everybody is going to be alright with it. And that's how it should be. You know, if you're going to go about Kickstarter and ask for people to go and fund your project, then you should make sure that you listen to all their demands and you listen to everything that they want. And if they have any quarrels, they have any issues at all with it, you should take heed of it and you should listen, because you can learn something from it as studios and as publishers. If a big-time publisher is not going to pick up the development of a game that hundreds of thousands of people want, then maybe this is the route that you have to go. You know, it could be like a dawn of a new era for development studios, but again, this is something that we could actually have a hand in. You know, I would like something like that, Mega Man Legends 3. How'd that slip out? But, you know, again, just examples out the ass of projects that people have wanted to see, and they haven't come to be because the powers that be have pretty much just like stamped their thumb down on it, or unfortunate circumstances have pretty much put up a big wall in front of it and said, nope, you cannot pass, fuck you, haha, evil mustache twirl. So it's, you know, again, say what you gotta say, anything down below, comments and video responses and shit like that. Ooh. So it goes to say, Shenmue 3 would be absolutely awesome, but would you be okay with it being done like this? And also, would you be okay with a bunch of other development studios who have been trying to get certain things out the gate but haven't been able to due to random hurdles and other obstacles going and getting in the way? So anyway, you can go and say what you gotta say. This is Alpha Medicine, as always. Nerds, nerdettes, and gamers. Game the fuck on.